Press On says the first step to recovery is admitting the police are at fault. Yeah.
Yeah. Press on. Assemble forth. Legion about. Sound off. Amble. Pursue happiness with your life and your liberty. And for God's sakes, exercise your Fourth Amendment right as one of the people not to be on in your person while you're on property accessible to the people. We got some gang activity here. There's a Georgetown police officer parked here for some reason at Pearl Vision. His lights aren't on, or her lights. You never know. We're at Wolf Ranch. Can't tell yet if they're in the vehicle or not. How's it going?
How you doing?
Good, how about you?
Oh, not too bad.
Sargent Laughlin. Yeah. What's going on?
I had an alarm call, but they're just cleaning some bin hood, so everything's good.
Oh, at Pearl Vision?
I was down here at Wingstop. But...
Oh, I didn't. Oh, at Wingstop. Yeah, I didn't see around the corner. All right. Yeah. You guys are back on nights. I'm so happy about that.
Back first night back.
Man, I've never appreciated you guys more than compared to the sheriffs. Man, I thought I was going to die the other night. I really did. A sheriff's deputy. I was right when Starbucks closed at 11 on Saturday night, April 20th. I walked out the door and I was headed that way towards the next exit, out of the parking lot.
Yeah.
And there was a sheriff deputy pulling somebody over. And I saw his lights go on, and they pulled into the entrance down there past Taco Cabana.
Yeah.
And then turned in and came this way. And the guy that was getting pulled over parked like you are in the spaces, and then the deputy, he parked over outside, right? So like he was blocking the space next to the car, right? Which is fine. But I was walking in the area right there, where cars are, but I was staying to the side, and I'm just walking, right, ambling, and then I got not even this close, and he said that he was gonna throw me to the ground and take me to jail if I walked up on him, whatever that means, and he said to go over there. Right, so I knew I was detained immediately because I was not free to go. I was required to go over there, wherever over there is not a very specific thing, but in that spot, it's right in front of Taco Cabana, and there's a like a garden.
Okay.
Next in front of Taco Cabana, there's like some plants and stuff.
Right.
And so I went as far over there as I possibly could. And, I was detained as far as I knew, right? And I asked him if the parking lot was closed, and he said yes, right? And, I mean, I usually don't stand for that, but there are some circumstances where an officer can do that, right? If it's a felony stop or, if he's worried. Yeah, there are some circumstances. And, when I get a direct order in that way where he's going to actually threaten violence and throw me to the ground, is what he said. I don't need that, right? That's great bodily injury or death on pavement, He's a SWAT officer because he's wearing green. So I know he was SWAT. He wasn't canine, right? And I don't need that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I followed his order, right? But I considered myself detained. I was not free to go because I was moving, right? Why couldn't I just continue on? You know, but that wasn't an option, right? So maybe he thought I was involved, right? This is what's going on in my head, you know. There are some reasons why I could be detained, you know, if he thinks I'm involved in whatever he's got going on there, or you know. So I complied, right? But I wanted his name, and he wouldn't tell me. And then he said, if I distract him or approach him, he's going to throw me on the ground and arrest me. Right now, already judging by his demeanor, distracting him, I mean, the guy's got ADD. He can't even focus on his stop, right? Without blaming me for distracting him. I don't even know, like. You know what I mean?
Right.
I've never been treated like that in my whole life. And I've said that before, but it's gradually getting worse with the sheriffs. You know, the
Come back
PD.
and say anything later, or did he just drive off after?
Then, okay, now this whole stop lasted less than 4 minutes, right? So bells are going off in my head, and I'm like, okay, it's not a felony stop. There's no way that he ended a felony stop in under 4 minutes. He never called for backup. Unlike you, the PD, it's not your policy to always call for backup on stops, but theirs is.
Right.
And Sargent Laughlin has told me that it is their policy to always call for backup, right?
Right.
And there was somebody else in the passenger seat of his car. Now, I don't know, maybe it was a ride-along or it was another officer, but either way, if it was another officer, why didn't they get out?
Get out.
Right? Like, if I'm there and he's worried about me, why wouldn't he get out, you know? So the stop ends and the car drives away, and then so I came over, and he walked around his car around back, and I came over here, and he's coming this way, and I wanted his name, and he said, I need to walk away from him. Right, the stop's over. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I need to walk away from him? So I knew I was undetained. Right, because now I need to walk away from him. But that is not the way to go. And during the stop, cars were driving in between me and him. So I knew that the parking lot was in fact not closed. Right? He's worried about me. I mean, just because if you pull somebody over, somebody commits an offense on the street, okay, and then you don't get to go and just commandeer Wolf Ranch for your traffic stop. Right. You know what I mean? And then anybody that happens to be legally in the parking lot is now threatened with great bodily harm and or death, being thrown to the ground on pavement. You guys are trained to cause great bodily harm and or death. I mean, leg sweeps or however you do it, you grab somebody's arm and force their head face down into the pavement.
I'm not sure what kind of training county gets.
I mean, I'm just saying these are moves that I've seen, you know, officers do, right? Where they grab your arm, put it behind your back, and then leg trip you and force you face first, right, forward. And I mean,
we don't usually go with any leg tripping or sweeping or any of that, but I'm sure it's out there.
Or backwards. I mean, when a SWAT officer says they're going to take you to the ground, I don't know what that entails.
Yeah.
Right, but I don't know. I mean, are they going to do a spear? I mean, are they going to just run and spear me? Or I don't even know. And I mean, I've never resisted an officer in my life. I will never. Right? If anybody wants to detain me, the most simple way is to just say, you're detained for this crime, right? And then I will comply. Well, I won't resist.
Right.
Okay, I don't always assist, but I won't resist, you know, and sometimes I even do a little assisting, right? I was detained by one of your officers, not your officers, but GPD, Officer Franks detained me. And I was like here, and he told me to step in front of the car. And I asked if I was detained, and he said yes. And I did walk in front of the car, you know. And then I wanted to know what I was detained for, and I never got an answer to that. Never.
How long ago was that?
It was in February.
Back now.
Yeah, it was on. It was in front of Wings. The Wingstop? No, not Wingstop. The Buffalo Wild Wings, right there. And again, I was leaving Starbucks, and this time I saw an officer come through. I didn't know it was Frank's yet, but I saw him turn this way, and I figured he was just doing his. Sometimes they drive through here, you know. And but then when I turned the corner, he did a U-turn and went back to Buffalo Wild Wings and got out with his flashlight. So I knew it was something because he had his flashlight in his hand. So I went over there. Yeah, so I went over there and started filming. And as soon as I got there, he asked if I was in there, right? And usually I don't answer questions, but you know, I said no right away, and I added that I've never been in there, okay, ever, which I have never been in there, you know. And then he went back in, and then Earnshaw got there, and he again asked me, but he was a little bit more informative. He told me that they got a description of a white guy with a beard, which really narrows it down.
Yeah, especially now.
Yeah. And he was with a girl with a green bandana, and he was forthright enough to say that he's never seen me with a girl with a green bandana, which is true. Probably never seen me with anybody. I mean, not like going anywhere with them. Right. You know what I mean? I talk to people, but
not like
you're not going to see me really hanging around with people, right? I'm just not a group kind of a guy. And but anyway, so he asked me if I had been in there, and I again told him no, I've never been in there. Right? I'm just filming, you know. And he's like, yeah, I know, you always film, right? But then they went back in there and did their thing, woo woo, and then came back out, and Earnshaw just straight up lies and says that they identified me, okay, that I was the one, you know. And that's just a bold-faced lie, right? And once an officer lies to me one time, I already know they're a liar, and we cannot trust them. And even though it's okay for you to lie legally, it's not a good idea. When you do it, you lose trust, and when you lose trust, it takes a long time to get it back, if ever. You know, and so I knew he was lying, right? And that is a tactic that's used, you know. Oh, we'll just tell him that he was identified so that he'll just admit it, right? Well, first of all, what is the crime? I mean, if whatever happened, right? Like somebody was in there and he said making threats. Okay, well, threats might be illegal. It depends on what kind of threats. I mean, was he threatening to call the manager, to complain, to write a bad review, to never come back here again, to tell a bunch of people, like to protest? What was he threatening exactly? You know, so I don't know if this is a crime or not, but I do know that whoever was in there is gone. So it's not trespassing, because even if it was me, I'm clearly not in there. So if they ask me to leave, that's not a crime, you know, to be asked to leave somewhere. Right. And if you leave, that's not trespassing. So, you know, I wanted to know what the crime was, right? And all I could ever get was, we're investigating to see if there's a crime.
Something burning?
They're working at Starbucks. Maybe they're cutting. No, I don't know. It does kind of smell like it, huh? But I don't hear sirens. I don't smell it anymore.
No. But it did for a second,
It
right?
did, you're right. And I don't have a very good nose for that, but...
I had to make sure I wasn't crazy, but maybe...
Yeah. I don't know.
Anyways.
But it's that, there's something about that crew, and you know, Earnshaw... See, I had met him before at the gas station, and he was training Onesto. And so I did a pop quiz because he was training somebody, and he's not even an FTO.
Right.
So I was really concerned already, like, you know. And usually my first question on a pop quiz is, when do you have to identify yourself to a police officer?
Right.
Right. And I'm really tired of hearing, well, it depends. Well, the circumstance. No, it's a very simple answer. When you're under lawful arrest, that's it. Okay. And, you know, he failed, okay? And so I told him that, no, you have to be under arrest. And then he argued and said, you only have to be detained, right? And so then I happened to run into Sergeant Roby down the street. And I had never met him, but that's his sergeant. And so I tried to complain to him about that, you know, because this is a guy training somebody. And that's the one code you use on every stop. When you're asking somebody for an ID, that's pretty much the first thing you do, you know. And so if you don't even know 3802, it's like, come on. I mean, I know you're bullying people out of their ID if you don't know that, you know. And but he didn't care. Roby doesn't care at all. And then he said that he does not care. And so then after that, when I was detained, he ended up going in and looking at the video and then finding out it wasn't me. Yeah, obviously, you know, but you should have watched the video first and determined whether or not there was a crime, you know, like what the threats were and who it was. Because one, I was going nowhere. I was filming. So detaining me just set you guys up, you know. It's like, and I don't make complaints. I mean, not like go in and write them down. I don't go out of my way. Like, I'm not going to walk over to the police station to make a complaint, and it's going to go nowhere. I know it is. You know, it's going to serve no purpose except wasting my time and frustrating me, and I just don't do that. You know what I mean? But well, why? You know what I mean? Why detain somebody and open yourself up to that with no crime being determined? You have to have suspicion of a crime, not just maybe there's a crime, but a specific crime. You know, you don't have to have proof of that crime, but reasonable suspicion that a crime has been committed and that I'm the one that has committed it, you know, or is about to commit it, you know, but not just, well, we have a report, okay, it might be you, but we don't know if there's a crime involved, but while we're figuring that out, you're not free to go. You know what I mean? That's a line that seems to get missed, you know, is that there does have to be a specific crime. You don't have to tell me what it is. You don't have to. Right. But
something more than the generalities of
I mean, at some point you kind of do, right? And so then he Earnshaw pulls out this, what I call crib notes. You know what crib notes are? Crib notes are like when you had a book report in school and you were supposed to read a book, but you go and you buy the crib notes, and it's like a little pamphlet that gives you a briefing on what the book was about.
That was Cliff Notes.
Cliff Notes.
Okay.
Why do I keep calling them crib notes?
Crib
notes are like cheating notes. That you take it. Yeah. Cliff Notes, right? Yeah. And he had that, but for like the codes, your book of codes or whatever. Mm-hmm. But he was reading these Cliff Note things. It's this little pamphlet. Mm-hmm. And I mean, 3802 is only 3 paragraphs long. Okay, so why can't you read 3 paragraphs? You have to have that like simplified for you. And then he says again that I was wrong about 3802 and you only have to be detained. And he pulls this little pamphlet out and he's like, see, and closes it. And I'm like, no, you know what I mean? So now he's even more emboldened to think that you only have to be detained. Right. You know, you can't arrest somebody for failing to ID. They have to already be under arrest for something. Right? The original crime cannot be failure to ID in Texas. Right. You know, under state law. I mean, federal law, you only have to be detained. But
not to change subjects on you too much, but the other day when you were out with me on that accident scene,
yeah,
did you get a video of me tripping and falling on that curb?
I don't think so. Wait, which accident? There was so many accidents.
Yeah, I had like 2 of them that day. But one of them, we were kicking the stuff out of the road over there in front of Starbucks. Or not really in front of it. It was on the curb there by the...
There's been so many accidents. Was it the semi-truck?
No. This was a...
on the highway?
No. It was here in the parking lot.
I think I did, maybe. I wouldn't worry about it.
Terrible on that because I thought about it after. I was like, man.
I think I remember saying something about that too. No, I'm not your enemy, Sargent Laughlin. I'm really not.
Oh, you know. I mean, we talk fairly often.
I mean, it's no secret that I think you're in a gang. Okay, and that's not a secret. But I'm not your enemy. Okay, I'm not against you.
Right.
You know, personally. I think that you have great intentions. You know, that's my assessment of you, right? Like, I don't think you want to go out there and hurt people. You know, you want to do good. But at the end of the day, you are in a gang, and you will back up your fellow gang members. You know, like, I mean, you're not, what's that?
That's one perspective, yeah.
Well, it's kind of a law that you can't speak on, like, investigations or,
They're internal,
you know, yeah, you can't really go against another officer. I mean, if you show up on scene, you are supposed to believe what your officer says. You know, if he's got his gun out, then you have cause to take your gun out. And if he shoots, you can shoot. And, you know, if he says that somebody did something wrong, like, it's not going to get sorted out by you. It's going to get sorted out later. You're not going to, you know, get in the middle of it.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, in that respect, you know, you all back each other up, you know, some more than others, right? Like, Sargent Lanier he might be nominated as an honorary one of the people because he got a bad officer fired. And so, Officer Bermudez.
Oh.
Yeah, but see, Officer Bermudez didn't get fired for battering children in front of a national audience. That was only a 40-day suspension. And there was actual victims, minors. You know, you're familiar with that? Him tripping those students? I mean, there's no excuse for that. That could never have been like he was performing his duties. He was not performing his duties,
right.
You know, and I don't think he ever even claimed that he was at the time. Right. I don't know what he said because we'll never know what his excuse was. But that was a 40-day suspension. But tampering with Sargent Lanier's gun is fireable, right? And that there was no victim in that. Nobody actually was hurt. You know, you can say it could have, but it didn't, right? And I mean, to be honest, Sargent Lanier did leave his gun, right, at the range.
I don't know the specifics of that because I wasn't out there when any of that happened.
Oh, he left his gun at the gun range, and then he called Sergeant Bermudez to grab it for him, and he did. But then he took it to like a sporting goods place and tried to get them to change the sights in order to teach him a lesson about leaving his shit laying around, supposedly.
Right.
And then he gave it back to Sergeant Lanier, but didn't tell him. And then the next day, he had to take the gun out. Like, he might have had to use it. He had to take it out. And then after that, Bermudez told him that he might want to change it, like 12 over and 12 down, or whatever that means. I'm not really gun knowledgeable, but he needed to adjust his sights, you know. And so then Sergeant Lanier made a complaint, you know, and that was fireable. You know, the guy should have been fired when he attacked those kids, right? And that wasn't his first thing, right? I mean, that cannot be a secret that there's that guy out there, right, acting like that. He didn't just wake up that day and decide to attack those kids. He was already an aggressive maniac. They should not have been entrusted with a gun. You know, I mean, there's more stories about him that I've seen, you know,
right.
And of people that didn't like make complaints, but I mean, the people, we talk about things, right? We don't have any of these policies like, oh, we don't talk about it until the investigation's done. No, we talk about it, you know, to anyone and everyone on Facebook, on YouTube, on, you know, to our neighbors and our friends, and we don't need all the evidence. We can judge you guys guilty, anybody guilty, on some, none, or all of the evidence, and there's social consequences.
Court of public opinion.
Yeah, but we can't put you in jail,
Right.
you know, on court of public opinion. But there are consequences. I mean, look at the Pound Me Too movement, or you know, like, I mean, you don't want to be in like some racist viral video or something like that. I mean, that could go really bad, you know.
Yeah.
And you might not go to jail, but everybody hates you.
Yeah, the backlash
you know?
of it.
Yeah, the backlash, you know. And but I'm glad that you guys are back on nights. I don't know, maybe that crew will be better on the daytime. I don't know.
We'll see. I know most of us are happy to be back on nights. I enjoy the the quiet and the calm sometimes. So it's good
That's
to
what
switch
I
back and forth
heard.
sometimes.
That's what I heard. Is like you can do your own thing a little bit more.
Yeah, less traffic, things like that, easier to get around. So
Yeah, there's
it's
that.
nice. I enjoy hearing the crickets at night.
Hearing the crickets. I usually never see a sergeant.
Yeah, we're around.
I mean, you guys, well, I don't know. Rarely do I see you guys except on accidents. The sergeants, or in lieutenants are like really rare. I don't know.
Yeah, there's not as many as them though.
There isn't?
No.
Your lieutenant is who?
Crawford.
Oh, Crawford. You know, I still don't think I've met him. Only Lieutenant Rayleigh and Lieutenant White, who Lieutenant Rayleigh is really pretty awesome. Lieutenant White, I don't know. I'm not gonna say that he's the worst, but I mean that whole night crew is under him, right? That was on the night crew, and they're a different breed, and you know it does start at the top, you know. So, I mean, at first he had a real big attitude, but then I broke through his wall, and we did have a 45-minute conversation, but you know, I don't think he really cared, like about 3802 or about, you know, like a Palmer that threatens to arrest me for disorderly conduct for saying I don't give a shit. You know, that's nonsense. You know, I mean, there has to be a breach of the peace. There has to be. Right. You know, and you know that, and Sergeant Lanier knows that, and Lieutenant White knows that, and Fox knows that, and you know, everybody that I've dealt with on well, your guys' shift, whether it's, you know, tomorrow there'll be different people, but is fine, you know, and even Sergeant Weston, you know, he's a good sergeant, I think, but he's over some of those guys, like George. George is scary. That guy's scary. I thought he was going to arrest me one time. I've only met him on one stop, I think, but it wasn't even his stop. It was a trooper, and it was in the well, kind of near Taco Bell. It was like in the area in between the parking lot of HEB and Taco Bell.
Yeah, that little drive kind of. Right
yeah, and he had pulled somebody over, and there was like a little island right here, and it was Trooper Marfaro, and I was standing on the island filming him, and he was doing a search of the car, and like we had already been there for about 10 minutes, and the trooper really didn't care. You know, he even turned his back to me and did his search and everything. And I was fairly close, but he didn't care. Like, we've met before, and I mean, the troopers have a bad attitude, but they know me by now to know that I'm not a threat, right? And I'm just filming. And so, but then George gets there and he tells me I need to move back and that I'm interfering. You know, I didn't just instantaneously interfere. Like, I've been here for 10 minutes, you just got here, you're late, you don't know anything about what you're talking about, and he wants to tell me to move back, and I didn't want to move back. You know, I'm fine, I'm not breaking any laws. And then so I said no, and he immediately came at me like he was gonna grab me, and I was like, okay, I'll move back, but I want your sergeant. And Sergeant Weston pulled up like right then and saved the day. I was so glad, and I reclaimed my spot, you know, and he knew. You know, Sergeant Weston was not denying that I had every right to be there. That's not interfering. You actually have to put some kind of obstacle, you know, in the way. Speech alone can never be interfering. You know, and I don't like yell and scream and try and distract you guys, but that's legal. I could, but I don't think that that's necessary. You know, I don't think that's effective. And I'm not trying to get an officer hurt. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to get anybody hurt. I'm not trying to rile up the scene to where somebody's going to take out their aggression on somebody else or me or be distracted. You know what I mean? I take care to like try and position myself in a spot where you can see me, where like I'm not sneaking up on you from behind, you know, in between some trees and the bushes and stuff, you know. And I talk about that on my videos when I'm doing it. I'm like, I'm going to enter this way because I don't want to do that. And, you know, sometimes I'm farther away than others. Like, I'm never going to stand in the middle of an area like this. Like with that sheriff on Saturday, what did he think I was going to do? I mean, I've never met him. Right. You know what I mean? I don't know. I mean, I have my phone like this. You know what I mean? I don't think that that's proof that I'm filming, but even if I was, I mean, that's not a crime. You know, I was. Of course I'm filming. I'm always filming. But usually when it's somewhere that, like, I can't get as close as I want, I might do a pass by, because I can get closer if I'm just walking right by. You know what I mean? I think I can, you know? And my rule of thumb is that, you know, when people say, how close can you get? Well, you can get pretty close depending on the circumstances. And so, like, if you had somebody pulled over on the street and the sidewalk was right next to it, there's not even a grass easement, there's just a sidewalk right there, I have no reason to believe the sidewalk's closed. Right. So, you know, that being public property, I would think I could be pretty much this close, because that's how close you'd be, you know? And I would try and stay to one end, right? But you know, I wouldn't just be in the middle, but that it could be pretty close, you know what I mean? It's not like I can go into somebody's yard, right? And I mean, I'm not going to stand in the middle of the street, and I'm not going to go to the other side of the street either, you know? So, I mean, sometimes you can get pretty close, but sometimes it's just not safe to stand that close, and so I stand farther. But I don't think there's, like, you guys have some bubble around you where just because you stop somebody that nobody else is allowed to come within some certain magical distance of you. You know, if you close an area, which you can, with tape, or, you know, your cars, or have officers stationed around, I mean, obviously it might take a minute, and, you know, it doesn't just magically happen immediately, right? But, I mean, don't say an area is closed if it's not closed. Right? I mean, it's such a world of difference between you and Roby. Roby, I have issues with Roby. I've talked about this with a lot of officers, because he just doesn't care. And he specifically said that. You know, I don't care. Right? That's scary.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Have you ever written a search warrant?
Have I ever written one?
Yeah.
For search warrant for, like, a house or something?
Sure.
Maybe one. I really don't ever deal with it. It's what the detectives are for. So.
Oh.
It's been years since I've even. I mean, really, if I can even remember, it's probably been one.
One?
Mm-hmm.
For what?
I don't even really remember. It really has been that long ago, because we just don't typically do it on our end, on the patrol side. Because if it's something like that, we usually send it off detective or somebody else, and they write all that stuff up. We don't generally follow up on all the cases. We take the initial stuff, send it off. So it's rare, unless somebody is working something specifically all the way through. But even then, they're generally working with detectives or somebody else to get all the case kind of situated, squared away. But,
what do you do as a sergeant?
Really just watching the people that you have on your shift, showing up to certain calls, checking on things, making sure it's good, approving reports, like the initial reports that are coming in.
You have to approve it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're the first line of the approval on the reports. So every report that gets submitted comes to the shift supervisor, the sergeants. They go through, approve it, check for grammar, you know, all that, make sure all the little boxes are checked in. All the
checking for grammar?
It's the tedious work.
Oxford commas? Do you guys use Oxford commas?
No, not nothing too crazy. Just the basic stuff. Making sure things match up, that they have the, you know, right names and date of birth in the right spots, things like that. Make sure typos as far as not transposing numbers, those kind of things.
Sure. I can understand that. So Fox is working tonight. He's with
off.
you, right?
He's in training.
Oh, he's in training?
Yeah, he's in training all week. I don't remember which kind of training, but I know he's.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say use of force training.
Probably some kind of defensive tactics.
Probably, right? They never send you to the law library, do they? No?
No.
Never.
No law library.
There's no training on any case laws?
Yeah, we do case law stuff all the time. Just in between, as things come out, we give reviews, talk about it, briefing, different things like that. We have the legislative update when that comes out. Things like those type of updates. But
Have you guys ever had a briefing about me?
about you,
Never? That you know of? All right. I'm pretty sure that there has been.
oh, I'm sure some people.
I think Lieutenant
Talked
Rayleigh
about
had a briefing about me, yeah.
But I mean, other than just like, especially with us in passing, we're just like, hey, it shows
Right.
up films, everything's fine, we're good.
Well, my name got passed around.
Your full name?
No, nobody knows my full name. Nobody knows. Not that it's a secret. I mean, if you guys arrest me, you can have it. You know what I mean? But there's
give us
no
a reason
need
to
for
arrest
it. Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to, because I'm not committing crimes.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why I haven't had any problems, except for that sheriff. That was the closest I thought I was gonna be. I didn't really feel like I had much room to work. Like I just didn't feel like he was going to let me walk away. You know what I mean? Could I go around? Could I? You don't have to say somebody's detained to detain them. You know. In fact, rarely does an officer even say that. But I mean, I don't know. What do you think? Like, if somebody tells you that they're going to throw you to the ground and take you to jail if you don't go over there. If you go over there, you'll be just fine. But that is telling you to go somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, again, depending on the exact full thing of it, but I mean, I could see how it can go that way. It could, again, depending on exactly how he's saying it, what he's saying, all that, it could just be saying, hey, get out of the way, go over there, out of the way, kind of a thing. But, you know.
If I was stopped, like if I had stopped to film,
right.
then I could see, you know, okay, go over there. But when somebody's just walking, right, there is no reason to believe that they're going to stop.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, if you're still walking, yeah, you would think they're just going to go on walking by.
Right. Usually officers, a lot of times, they will like turn around and like give me an opportunity to walk by, and I'm like,
just kind of look and watch.
yeah, and I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. You know what I mean? But that hadn't happened yet, and I probably wasn't going to even do that yet. You know what I mean? I was going to do a walk by, and then come back around, because it was like I couldn't really see. You know what I mean, from that distance. But I wouldn't like stop in the middle, you know. But I don't. Clear instructions are important.
Yeah.
You know, not just over there, like, you know, not
be specific. Make sure everybody's on the same page and knows what's going on.
Yeah, especially when you're threatening violence. I mean, I don't think you would threaten violence like that. I don't know.
No, you know me better than that. I'm pretty easygoing.
Well, I've never seen you on a stop. I've never seen you in a situation where you didn't want me there. I don't know how that would go. You know, now it'd probably be fine, but, you know, if I walked up and another one of your officers just shot somebody right there, I don't know, you might not want me there.
We'd be closing the scene for that, though.
Yeah, but if I'm there, I'm in your scene.
Yeah.
And if I'm in your scene, then I'm part of your scene.
Yeah, we can still redirect you somewhere other inside the scene.
Can you? I don't know. I mean, wouldn't that be like taking the chance of messing some other evidence up? I mean, if I just walk up and, you know, I'm standing here, it'd be better not to move.
Again, just walking through it. I mean, unless you're standing in the middle of a pool or something, you know, maybe a little different. But
Right.
you're just there.
Right.
You're just
This is
there.
a pretty far-fetched hypothetical, yeah. But no, like, I mean, even Lieutenant Rayleigh has always been really awesome. But one time on Christmas Day, there was an accident on the highway, and somebody may or may not have died. I still never got an answer on whether anybody died there, but he was calling it a possible homicide at that time, and I had gotten in, and he was all flustered. His hair was going everywhere, and you know, he saw me coming, and I know he was just like, oh, right. And he told me to stop, and I stopped, right, because that's a lawful order. And so then he he asked me to like go stand by his car, which wasn't very far back, and he said he was going to come back and talk to me. And so I figured I could set my cup of coffee on his front tailgate while I rolled a cigarette. So I was fine with going to his car. And plus I had a good rapport with him. But then it was Christmas, and every other officer that showed up, all they wanted for Christmas was to tell one of the people what to do. And
you were that person?
That one of the people. People aren't persons, Sergeant.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's right. I forget.
You forget?
One of the people, not persons.
Have we talked about that?
I think once before. Maybe once before.
All right. Do you have your code book?
Which code book?
Texas Transportation Code?
Transportation code? No, I don't carry one of those.
You don't?
Transportation codes.
Well, maybe one day you'll get a chance. And if you look up what the definition of person is within any code on there, it's going to say something like a person is an individual or a natural man or anything. It's going to say lots of things. But then, like, it'll always say individual. Okay, a person is an individual. And then if you look up individual, it'll say an individual is a person. Okay, that's called a circular definition, where a person is an individual and an individual is a person. So it doesn't tell us what they are. It just says that person and individual are the same thing, and those two words are interchangeable. Okay? And so that's what we can glean from that. That's what's called not clear, ambiguous, right? But then if we dig deeper, okay, and we look at the original founding document, the Constitution, you know, and then we can see, because these words people and person just aren't any old words. Okay, these are words that were used in the Constitution, you know, and citizen. People, person, and citizen are the three characters that were introduced in the Constitution. Okay, and we the people, in order. Okay, so that means that the people are giving an order. They're writing the order in a specific order. So the Constitution is an order, and the people are giving it. And the order is in a specific order, right? And that order matters because what is first is more important than what comes later. Okay, so then the First Amendment, oh, well, before I get to that, the people are securing the blessings of liberty to themselves and their posterity. But the key there is that the people are securing it to themselves. So they have the authority to grant themselves the authority. Right? And they're granting the authority to the government to do certain things in certain circumstances.
Right.
Okay? And so then the First Amendment says, you know, freedom of the press and religion and assembly and speech, but those rights are to the people. It says people. In the Second Amendment, the right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed. We haven't seen the word person or citizen yet until the Fourth Amendment. And then it says the right of the people to be secure in their person. Okay, now, so the first time we have the word person, it's used in conjunction with people. And this is important because clearly the framers are telling us that these are two separate things. Okay, so just like you have the right to speech, you have the right not to make speech. You have the right to religion, you have the right not to have a religion. Okay, so the opposite is always true. What's mentioned is the one that gets criminalized. The other one is obvious, right? The opposite. If you're not making speech, nobody's been arrested for not making speech. Well, actually, I've heard that called obstruction of justice before. But nevertheless, okay? So these rights are to the people, but the people have the right to be in their person, so therefore they have the right not to be in their person. Okay, not just simply because they're saying they're not in their person, but it's later we'll get to how you get in your person, okay? And I'm not ever going to come up with a complete definition of it, but what we're going to see is that we start finding out that who is a person, okay? So in the rest of the Fourth Amendment, you know, no no warrant shall issue except upon probable cause, particularly describing the places to be searched and or persons to be seized. So a person can be seized, okay? But it didn't say the people can be seized or one of the people. It says a person can be seized. But we haven't really learned what a person is yet. But when we get to the 14th Amendment, it defines what a citizen is. And it says, a citizen is a person that's been born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the authority thereof, shall not be deprived of any privileges or immunities. So there's several key points here. One, a citizen is a person. Okay. Two, they have to be subject to the authority thereof. And when this comes into play is like Indians. Okay, they're not subject to the authority thereof. Diplomats' children, they're not subject to the authority thereof. They're not even citizens, right? If you're a diplomat and you're here with diplomatic immunity and you have a child while you're here, they have diplomatic immunity, but they don't get birthright citizenship because they're not technically subject to the authority thereof, right? And so that's just a couple of examples. But the 3/5 clause, the slaves clause, okay? And I bring this up not because of slaves, but because they called slaves persons. See, when they said all other persons shall be counted as 3/5. So they were talking about slaves, and so slaves were persons. And this makes sense because slaves didn't have rights, but people had rights. And so on paper, you have to remember this is on paper, and on paper doesn't understand feelings or that these are living, breathing creatures. All they know is that there's this thing called the people and this other thing called persons. And people have rights, and persons over here can be a slave. Okay, but not all persons are created equal because the person with the most votes is president. So both slaves and the president are both persons. And that again makes sense because the president doesn't have rights. The president is a servant of the people, just like you're a servant of the people. And if you think about it, you don't have any rights. Well, you have one. You have the right to vote. Thanks to I mess this up sometimes, the 17th, the 22nd, and the 24th Amendment give the right to vote to citizens, and each one to women, one to, like, it can't be discriminated against for your race, your religion, your, yada, yada. And then also it changed the age to 18. Okay, so it was 3 separate amendments, but all of them say the right to vote for citizens. Okay, but the people already had the right to vote for representatives because it says the House of Representatives shall be chosen by the people, right? So if the people already had the right, they wouldn't need to make another amendment to give, if people and persons and citizens were the same thing. They're not the same thing. You know what I mean? And so like, we know that the government has the authority to regulate commerce. Nobody can argue that you have that authority because of the Commerce Clause, right? Congress shall regulate the commerce between the states, and then the states in turn have been allowed to regulate commerce within the state. Okay, so that's not denied. And when you do commerce, since the government is in charge of that, you have to ask permission. You might have to get a business license or various other things, and you have to follow the rules of commerce.
Right.
Okay? And so that's one way to be a person. And when you get a job, like whether it's the job you have or a job here, you have to fill out an application. And on that application, you're agreeing to be a person. It asks for personal information. And it gets your personal information. And your last name is first, and then there's a comma, and then there's your first name, and it's in all capital letters. And that's not how the people spell their name. They write their first name first. No comma. Okay? Remember, this is on paper. And on paper, details matter like that. I mean, on paper, it doesn't understand that this is the same thing. We just flipped it around and put a comma in there. Like, you know, we kind of just magically turn that back around when we're talking and think it's the same thing, but on paper it's not. Right? It's different, and it's in all capital letters. But you don't have to be doing commerce to be a person. Okay, you could be, well, working for the government, you're definitely a person, not just in your person. But like you, because you're under oath. So you're always a person. But like somebody at the DMV, when they get off, they're not a DMV, like they don't have a badge, like they're not honoring an oath. You know what I mean? So they're done when they get off work and they have their rights again. But you don't ever have rights. Okay? And you have privileges that look a lot like rights. Like you don't get to protest. You don't really have free speech. I mean, especially right now, you have to wear that uniform. So clearly your freedom of speech has been taken away. You know, you can't protest right now. You can't be a member of the press right now. You can believe whatever religion you want, but you don't get to preach it right now.
Right.
You know, you have that privilege when you get off, right? And that privilege looks a lot like my right, but it's been messed with. It's been abridged. It's been infringed. You know, it's been changed. And depending, not all persons are created equal, right? So one person might have more privileges. Like you have sometimes more privileges than I have rights. I mean, some of your privileges exceed my rights, right? Like you have privileges to block traffic when you're in the course of your duty, or, you know, lots of other things, right? The traffic codes don't apply to you. You're exempt from them when you're doing your job, you know? And that's a privilege and immunity, right? And I don't have I don't have those, right? Because you can either lead a righteous path. Righteous has the word right in it, and we're talking about rights, or you can lead a life of privilege. But you can't have both. Okay? And sometimes you can be here on, you know, with your rights, and then you can step over into your person, right? So like if you're doing commerce, or you work for the government, or you're in the military, or you're on probation, you've agreed to be on probation, and that's probate. Okay, they just threw you into probate, or parole, which is peril. Okay, so now you're in peril, and you agreed. Okay, because you didn't have to agree to get out of jail or prison. You could have stayed and done your whole sentence, but you agreed to be a person and follow all the rules and codes and statutes and everything that apply to persons. Or if you're an immigrant, because when you immigrate, you have to ask the government permission. The people don't have to ask the government for permission to do anything, ever. But, I mean, they don't get to infringe on somebody else's rights.
Right.
You know, so if that goes without saying, because when it says that, you know, these rights can't be infringed or abridged or denied, well, if you deny somebody of their rights, then obviously it's happened, and so, you know, you must be stopped. Okay, so the people did give permission to the government to stop people that have harmed another man or damaged another man's property or stolen it or defrauded another man in contract. And when I say man, I mean one man is also a man with a womb, right? So, you know, we're not leaving out women here, but am I making a little sense here?
I'm following you.
Right? And everything nothing adds up. Once you pull this thread, you can see that our language splits into two areas where we're either talking about persons or people, right? And persons have personal information, people have private information. There's private property and there's personal property. And I don't have to go out on a limb to say you have never once made the mistake of calling somebody one of the people when you arrest them.
Right.
Never.
Right.
You have never gone on the stand and called somebody one of the people. Never. And that doesn't happen by accident. You've been told to call them a person.
Just call them by their name. Usually they define.
Well, you might call them by their name, but I mean, you'll say a person or an individual, right? You use those words, or a suspect, or a victim. All these words are really different terms that mean person. Whenever you look up those words, it all goes back to person. That's the end of the line for it, is person. And person is never defined. You know, I can't define what exactly a person is, but I can say that the president is a person. You're a person, because if you look up police officer in the Texas Transportation Code, it's going to say a person.
Right.
You know, in a lot of other things, but it's going to say a person that has, you know, yeah, you know, yeah. But I mean, hopefully you think about this, you know, because your codes, they all say persons, you know, and it makes sense, right? Like, I mean, if I use just a simple example of jaywalking, okay? Now, obviously, we don't want persons, if persons are people doing commerce or immigrants or people or persons on parole or probation, government employees, military workers, we don't want them just crossing anywhere, okay? Because they don't need to. But the people have a right to press, okay? And right now I'm pressing on, right? Pressing is movement, okay? And in order to have a free press, you have to be able to press freely. Okay, so if you've got somebody stopped on one side of the road and there's no cars coming, well, as one of the people, I have a right to press. And the news is not going to go to the crosswalk. Okay, it's not going to do that, right? The news is, they have a right, you know, not to obstruct traffic, not to cause an accident, but they don't need a crosswalk. You see, because, and that makes sense, right? Because you can't restrict the news just because of that, right? If you can make all these rules and they apply to the people, then you can stop the free press, because the press is not free anymore. You see, if you have to get a license to press on in a carriage, this is a carriage, this is a motor vehicle, but if it wasn't for commerce, or for, you know, a person, but under that hood, it'll say how many horsepower is on that engine, right? Because this is a horse-drawn carriage. Yes. That's why they have horsepower. It all goes back to these words that, you know, are used for a reason, right? Because we have the right to press on, to assemble forth, right? It's impossible to have freedom of assembly if you can't assemble to the place of assembly, right? The freedom of religion, okay, that's really religion, and legions are armies, and armies march, okay? You legion forth, legion about, right? Again, movement we're talking about here. And freedom of speech is sound, and sound travels. So when somebody sounds off, sounds out, right? It's movement. You know, so all four of the First Amendment rights include movement.
Right. You
know, to amble. The first word, preamble, right? If they're preambling, then everything after that is an amble. And amble only has one definition, which is to walk, right? To pursue happiness, which isn't in the Constitution, but property is. And property covers pursuing happiness, because that property out there is public property, but it's also private property because the public is a private group that only allows the people into it. So in order to be in the group called public, you have to be one of the people. If you're not one of the people, you're not allowed in that group. So the people own that property, and it's their property. And they don't need to ask the government to use it or how to use it. But they don't get to infringe on somebody else's rights either. You know? So, like on the side of the highway, there's lots of litter. Or in the middle of the road, there might be a divot. Okay? Well, that's news. Okay? We have the right to hold our government accountable. You know, so if I want to go take a picture of a pothole in the middle of the road, well, I don't have to use the sidewalk, obviously. I have to go out into the middle of the road in order to get that picture. Right? But the people can do that. But persons don't get to. Right? And that makes sense because persons are doing it for money, or they're criminals, or they're a guest coming into our country. Right? So we have all these extra rules that can be applied to them, you know, but like smoking weed, okay? Smoking weed is not commerce, but selling weed would be, right? So selling weed applies to everybody. I mean, if you're selling weed, instantaneously you're in your person because you're doing commerce. But if you're smoking it, okay, we don't want employees that are working with our food, with our things. We don't want big rig drivers and taxi cab drivers driving around all high. They're driving around for a living, for money, for profit or personal gain, and they're doing it all day, every day, and they're putting us at risk because we're using their services, right? So we don't want them to be doing that, you know, and that's fair, right? So like, if you want to catch people smoking weed, drive around behind businesses and catch the employees that are smoking on their break.
Right.
You know, because you can have a field day doing that. You don't need to mess with the people, you know, that have a little bit of weed. Let Fox know that one. You know, I'm never going to let him live it down. I did film him arrest this girl. Probably ruined her whole life. Arrest this girl for a roach and a grinder. Took her to jail. Towed her car.
Illegal in Texas.
Well, I mean, she probably doesn't know the difference between a person and a people, and she probably just handed it right over. You're not going to meet too many people that know, right, or that will make this argument. And, you know, everybody's entitled. Well, I'm not entitled. You're entitled. And that's not a good thing, okay? Because, I mean, you get privileges, but, like, you have a title, an officer. That's your title, right? And houses have titles, cars have titles, boats have titles, ships have titles, and persons have titles, because persons are basically property, like slaves, right? You're a servant, not a slave because you're paid, but you're still a servant, right? And so servants can't tell their master what to do. That doesn't make any sense. You can't be a servant of the people and be the people at the same time.
Okay.
This making any sense?
A little bit, but I'm not gonna lie. It's the first night. I haven't had my coffee yet. It's starting to go.
Well, think about it like
at this point.
All right, I'll just say one more thing, and then I'll let you go. But the people decided one day to start a country, okay, basically a corporation. And they did. They started it, the United States of America. And they decided to hire employees, okay? And then one day those employees took all the guns and they started telling their employer what to do. And that's called tyranny. Okay, so when the employees decide to write on the side of their car that they're partners, this is not a partnership. It's an employer-employee relationship. When they decided to ask for cooperation, it's not a co-op. It's an employer-employee relationship. You cannot have cooperation. You can only cooperate with fellow operators, fellow operatives, right? If somebody's above you, you can't cooperate with them. And if somebody's below you, you can't cooperate with them. So if they're subject to your authority, they can't cooperate.
Right.
And if they're above you, the people, they can't cooperate. You're never going to be on even ground with somebody that's not in the government. You're either have authority over them or you're a servant to them.
Okay.
Yeah. I've had a blast, but I do hope some of this sinks in.
Oh, I'm sure it will, but I'm definitely in need of some caffeine for sure. That water's not cutting it.
If I could just,
1:30.
if I can just get one yes or no, do you want to meet me in court one day
Do I want to meet you in court?
with my argument?
No, because then I'd have to arrest you for something.
No, I mean, would you want to face me in court with this argument?
Oh, that's what the attorneys, they fight all that stuff. I just answer the easy questions.
You'd have to be on the
I
stand.
answer all the yes or no questions.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night,
All right,
Sergeant.
man. We'll see you around.
All right.
Master by the name of Bates, smoking more than all 50 states combined. Yeah, right, I gotta stay on the grind. I got no money, so my weed's on my mind. I hit the club, but you know I can't dance. 7 and 7 in my cutoff chance. Had that shirt in my long ass hair. What part of how I look makes you think I care?